Big night last night. Maction was back. Ball State lost, sadly. But, it's all right. We're rolling because we also had the first official college football playoff rankings come to light. And, if you'd asked me before the year started, Jonathan, do you think you're going to open your show on the Wednesday after the first CFP rankings go out and talk about IU? I'd have been like, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to do that. That just feels like a really far-fetched thing to happen. But, this is where we're at. Indiana, 9-0, good football team. And they come in last night ranked 8th in the first official college football playoff rankings. But due to how the seeding and stuff works, BYU, highest-ranked Big 12 team. Therefore, they'd actually be the 4th seed, moving Indiana down to the 9 slot. So I saw a lot of people online last night saying that Indiana was disrespected and that they should have been ranked higher. I disagree. I feel as though when it comes to Indiana being ranked, 8th is really the perfect spot for them to be ranked. Okay, with them being ranked 8th, I feel like the College Football Playoff Committee acknowledged that they're a good team. But it also communicates the fact that they haven't beaten anyone good. Right? That is just the reality of where the Indiana Hoosiers are at as of right now. Okay, their 2 best wins are against Washington and Nebraska, who are both 5-4 and simply not very good. So the fact that Indiana was ranked in front of BYU, even though BYU has wins over Kansas State, who's ranked 19th, and SMU, who's ranked 13th, I find that to be a tremendous sign of respect. The committee saying, we've watched Indiana play football, we've watched them blow everybody out, and because we've seen the absolute dominance from the Indiana Hoosiers so far this year, we're going to rank them above BYU, who has a better resume. Look, if anyone was ranked too low last night, it wasn't Indiana, it was BYU. When it comes to Indiana, however, I find that there's just no reason to be upset. They were ranked properly. I figured they'd be ranked somewhere between 7th and 9th, and they came in ranked 8th. I mean, it just is, name bias is sadly a thing in college football. Really, it's a thing in every college sport. We saw the NCAA tournament committee just this past March Madness put Virginia in over Indiana State, a large part of that being because Virginia just has more name bias in college basketball than Indiana State does. Name bias, it's a thing, and that's part of why Indiana was ranked 8th. When it comes to college football, Indiana will not get the benefit of the doubt. They aren't. They will not get the benefit of the doubt because they're Indiana. There's just no way around it. Meanwhile, teams ranked in front of them like Miami, Penn State, and Tennessee are all going to get the benefit of the doubt. All 3 of those teams were ranked to start the year pretty high as well, I might add. And they all have a ton of history. Tennessee's won a national title, and the Peyton Manning years, and Penn State's been good for the last decade, and Miami, used to be known as the U. Like there's history with all 3 of those teams. And when you look at Indiana, they weren't ranked when the year started. They've come out of nowhere, and the only history that Indiana has in the world of college football is a history of losing, and that's just the simple reality of it. Sadly, name bias and sexiness matters in college sports. Like putting in Miami, the U, if you will, that's just way sexier than putting in the Indiana Hoosiers. Okay, Miami and Penn State, I thought, were both ranked too high. Okay, and speaking of all the rankings, Shehan Jayaraja of CBS Sports, he's going to join me here in about 15 minutes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the playoff rankings. He's going to be swinging heavy for BYU. But when it comes to Miami and Penn State, I feel like they both should have been ranked lower. But they were ranked higher because their names are Penn State and Miami. Like Penn State lost to Ohio State by 7. But if you actually watch the game, you know that game wasn't close. It should have been a blowout. Okay, Ohio State threw a bad pick six and then fumbled the ball through the back of the end zone. Okay, like if those two things don't happen, Penn State scores like 6 points and Ohio State wins, 27-6 or whatever it would have been. Okay, like that game wasn't close. And the fact that Penn State was ranked sixth is just absurd to me. And then, like, when you look at Penn State's resume, that's not very impressive either. Like, their two best wins are against Illinois, who's 6-3. That's a good team. Not ranked, but they're good. And Wisconsin, who's 5-4. Like to me, those wins aren't any more impressive than Indiana's two best wins over Nebraska and Washington. And more importantly, Penn State's not blowing out bad teams in the same fashion that Indiana is. Penn State being ranked in front of Indiana is simply absurd. Indiana's looked better, and their resume is just as good. And it's the same thing for Miami. There's no reason for Miami to be ranked in front of Indiana. Their best win is against Louisville, who's 6-3 and ranked 22nd, and Duke, who's 6-3. But like, they're Duke. Come on now. Like, to me, like, those wins aren't impressive. Like, those wins aren't really much more impressive than Indiana beating Washington and Nebraska. And when you look at Miami, they also beat Virginia Tech because the replay booth overturned a Hail Mary call that shouldn't have been overturned. And they beat Cal, who's 4-4 and 4-4 overall and 0-4 in ACC play, by one, in part because replay once again missed a blatant targeting call. Miami's two best wins are a little bit better than Indiana's, but they haven't played anyone great, and they're barely beating average teams. Like, that to me isn't worthy of being ranked fourth in the country. I get that they have Cam Ward, okay, the current favorite to win the Heisman, but that team as a whole hasn't been good, and they haven't been as dominant as Indiana. The only reason why Penn State and Miami are ranked in front of BYU and Indiana, two teams that should have been ranked higher, is because of name bias. It's simply sexier to have Penn State and Miami firmly in the field as opposed to BYU and Indiana. What I learned last night is that the committee has clearly taken notice of Indiana and the dominance that they have had against, let's be honest, a very weak schedule. But nothing's really changed. Okay, this entire Indiana football season is going to come down to November 23rd when Indiana goes on the road to Columbus, Ohio to play Ohio State. Okay, look, if they win that game, every question that the committee and the haters have about Indiana will be answered. If they lose that game on a last-second field goal, then every question that the committee and the haters have will be answered. That game matters so much. And to me, Indiana doesn't even have to win that game after seeing them ranked 8th in front of teams like SMU and BYU and Notre Dame, who has a really good win. They don't even have to win that game. They just have to be competitive. November 23rd, that is what Indiana's entire season is going to boil down to. And that, to me, is abundantly clear after last night, unless teams ranked above them start losing, which I don't think is really going to happen in these final 3 weeks of the season.